bastards! Why are you torturing me like this?
Hey guys, Dustin here. Welcome to another episode of Horroritis. Today we're talking about 1981's Evil Dead, written and directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell. So with the Ash vs. the Evil Dead TV series coming out in October, I thought it would be a good time to cover the 3 Evil Dead movies leading up to the release of the series. So let's jump right into it. The movie opens with 5 friends, Scotty, Linda, Cheryl, Shelley, and Ash, all driving down the back road in Tennessee on their way to a cabin. The view alternates between shots of the 5 in the car and some unidentified entity going through the woods. Now, as soon as the entity reaches the car, it's about the same time that Ash pinpoints their location on a map, and Scotty loses control of the wheel, and they almost hit a truck.
Here.
A while later, Linda asks Scotty why they're getting the cabin so cheap. He admits that he doesn't know because he's never actually seen the cabin. They get to a rickety bridge that begins to fall apart as they drive across it, and then they're on their way to the cabin. Once they get to the cabin, we see that it looks a little run down, and there's a porch swing that keeps slamming into the side of the cabin. That is until Scotty finds the keys hidden above the door. Then the swing stops. The others unpack while Scotty has a look around. He finds an old tool shed with animal bones hanging from the ceiling and various sharp things hanging from the wall. Later, Cheryl's sitting by a window sketching a picture of a clock. Her hand, as if possessed, takes on a life of its own and starts drawing its own picture. By the time we're done, we have a picture of a book with a face on it. It's not a good picture, but you get it. As she stares at the picture she's just inexplicably drawn, the trap door to the cellar begins to slam on its own. Later at dinner, Scotty's telling her there's monsters in the basement making fun of her. Ash stands up to make a toast, everybody laughs, and then we see the cellar door slam open all by itself. Everyone rushes to see what happened, and Scotty is elected to go check it out. He goes down in the basement, and after a while he hasn't come back and they can't hear him anymore, so Ash decides to go down and find him himself. In the basement, Ash finds a door and he goes through it. He wanders around in the darkness for a while until Scotty, who presumably has been waiting for him, jumps out and scares him. He then tells him that he's found something awesome and he needs to go have a look. He then leads Ash to a table off in the corner that has a tape recorder, a shotgun, a dagger, and a book with a face on it.
Oh, God.
They take the stuff up out of the cellar and everyone gathers around to listen to the tape recorder. They learn that the book came from an excavation of Kandarian ruins and contains Sumerian burial rituals. They also learn that the book is written in human blood and bound in human skin, and that it can summon demons. Cheryl, who's already spooked enough, gets even more nervous and turns off the tape. Scotty, who wants to keep listening, fast forwards a little bit and turns it back on. Now when it comes back on, it's in the middle of an incantation, and we actually see Cheryl get more and more agitated as the recording goes, and we also see the ground outside beginning to crack. Finally, she screams at Scotty to turn it off, just as a branch from a tree crashes through the window, effectively ruining the mood for everyone, and they all decide to call it a night. So that's about the first 20 minutes of the movie, and all the good stuff comes after that, so get ready. Alright, let's get it out of the way right now. If you're familiar with the Evil Dead, then you're familiar with Ash. He's the smart-ass demon slayer with a shotgun and a chainsaw. Well, not quite in this movie. All the elements are there, but they're not quite assembled in the way that we know and love. In fact, all the awesome stuff that most people remember about the Evil Dead actually came from the Evil Dead Part 2, and that's because the first and second movies are essentially the same movie. But I'll get to that when we cover Evil Dead Part 2 later on. In this movie, Ash is pretty ineffective until everyone else is either possessed or dead, and then he's forced to act. And that's the first thing I really like about this movie. Nobody is safe. Each character is marked pretty much from the beginning before any demons are even summoned. As soon as they cross over into the Tennessee border, boom, they lose control of the car. Then the bridge starts to fall apart. Then Cheryl's possessed hand. These characters were being led from the very beginning, and like I said, everybody ends up possessed or dead. Starting with Cheryl, who actually gets the worst of it. She follows a voice out into the woods in the middle of the night, where the trees come alive, bind her up with roots and vines, and then violate her. This is a scene that Sam Raimi later regretted adding to the movie. After she escapes the trees and makes it back to the cabin, she convinces Ash to give her a ride back into town. But when they get to the bridge, they find it's destroyed, ensuring that nobody escapes. Later, as Linda and Shelley are trying to see if Linda can guess cards, Cheryl starts calling out the cards before they're even drawn. It's at that point that we realize she's possessed.
Queen of Spades. 4 of Hearts. 8 of Spades. 2 of Spades. Jack of Diamonds. Jack of Clubs.
This is also where we see one of the most memorable shots of the movie, and that's where Cheryl stabs Linda in the ankle with a pencil. Since Ash hasn't taken his leadership role yet, it's Scotty who saves the day by locking Cheryl in the cellar, where she basically spends the rest of the movie. Shelley is the next to be turned as the unidentified entity in the woods takes a hold of her and she attacks Scotty. Scotty, of course, has to save himself by cutting into Cheryl's hand. Now, even though Ash is holding an axe, he's too freaked out to help because Shelley's also chewing her own hand off. And even after that, it's still Scotty that hacks her to pieces. After that, Scotty's decided he's had enough and he's going to try to walk back into town, leaving Ash alone with a possessed Cheryl in the cellar and an unconscious Linda in bed. When Ash goes to check on Linda, he sees that the wound in her ankle is now sprouting a black infection that runs up her leg. That's the point where Linda is possessed and she sits up and starts cackling, and Ash makes a run for it. Scotty shows back up, but he's pretty torn up and bloody. He says he found a path around the bridge, but of course the trees are alive and wouldn't let him leave. Shortly after that, Scotty dies, and Linda attacks Ash. Now, since nobody's left, Ash is forced to act. So he eventually drags Linda outside, where he ends up cutting her head off. Ash comes back to the cabin and finds that Cheryl has broken out of the cellar. He grabs a shotgun and goes down to check it out. Now this also leads up to another great scene from this movie where the walls and the electrical fixtures bleed. When Ash comes up from the cellar, Cheryl attacks him just as Scotty's body turns and attacks him also. Now there's a scuffle and the Book of the Dead ends up pretty close to the fire and starts to burn. Now when he realizes that the book is burning and Cheryl and Scotty are also burning, he decides he needs to chuck the book completely into the fire. Now there's a struggle and eventually it happens and the whole thing winds down in one big scene full of stop motion animation, claymation, and cream corn. But I did say that everyone either dies or gets possessed, and that leaves us with Ash. Now after he's killed Cheryl and Scotty, he goes outside, and we see through the eyes of the unidentified entity going through the woods again, and it goes through the cabin, out the front door, straight into Ash, and the screen cuts to black, and we are to assume that Ash is also possessed. So this movie was made on a budget, and it shows. But this movie was also made by Sam Raimi, and that shows too. Sam Raimi has a habit of making good movies. most of the time. And it's thanks to Sam Raimi that the world was introduced to Bruce Campbell, who's been in some of the greatest B-grade sci-fi movies ever. If Raimi had cast anybody other than Bruce Campbell for this movie, I don't think the other movies would have been as good, or maybe they may not have even happened at all. Even though the first and second movies of this series are basically the same, the first one is really required watching because it shows how Sam Raimi grew as a filmmaker and how Bruce Campbell grew as an actor between the span of 2 films. I highly recommend this and the entire series, which of course we'll get to later. I would recommend them to anybody. If you haven't seen it, I really, really recommend that you go out and see it. And if you have seen it, well, as always, I recommend that you watch it again. And of course, if you want to own it, you can go ahead and click the link down in the description to take you to my site, where you'll find an Amazon link where you can buy it. If you want to get a hold of me personally to give me a recommendation on something that you think I should review, or you just want to tell me that you love me, you hate me, you think my shirts are awesome, or you wish I would shave my face more often, you can do so in the comments below, or you can hit me up on Facebook and Twitter, both at The Horroritis. So, until next time, I'm Dustin, this was Horroritis, thanks for watching.